All right, good people. We're here on this Thursday Food for Thought and excited to be back with Malaika Salaam on this series about wellness and what that means during these intense times. I'm Rachel Rosen, the founder of Spark, and just really first and foremost want to just express gratitude to this community and express my hope that everyone's doing well and staying healthy. And I'll just pass it over to Malaika and let you continue the conversation from last week, and also want to express deep gratitude to you and the presence and the leadership that you've just been bringing to the Spark family. So thank you, and let's just keep it going.
Absolutely. So hey y'all, hey, Malaika Salaam, hope dealer. That's right up there at the top of all of the things that I do. And that is how this relationship started. It was all with the quote that a leader is a dealer in hope. And so that's how I always want to approach the situation. Like, as long as we're here, as long as we're breathing, we have the choice to do something different. And that always brings me hope. Every week I say it, I'm super grateful. I'm super thankful for having a space to show up, for the fact that you continue to lean in and be willing to learn in public and, you know, open up these spaces and provide these spaces that I am finding very necessary right now to expand the conversation, right? So first we start with the conversations at home and having those, you know, important conversations at home. And then we, you know, take that out into our communities. And then we have those important conversations in our communities. And because our communities are made up of people who are also having those conversations in their homes and their other communities, then we can start to see the expansion, right, of the message. So we're talking about self-care. That's what we started this kind of series with. And I want to say that during this time, as I've been thinking about these things, something has shifted for me in the language of that, because I want to be very specific and very deliberate about the ways that we talk about this. And because self-care has turned into one of those buzzwords, one of those things that people are like, self-care, and it just, you know, covers this myriad of things. And is like, is it, you know, getting a manicure pedicure? Is it getting therapy? Is it praying? Is it, you know, cake? Is it, you know, one of the myriad of healing modalities? So I want to say that the language that I'm going to use, I would like to use care of self, to make that distinction, that we are being very deliberate in the ways that we are caring for ourselves. So it doesn't just fall under this banner of self-care. Mm-hmm. Fair enough? Mm-hmm. So last week I was talking about intellectual wellness, and right before we got started with this conversation, I was saying that I saw a picture that my cousin posted of these two little babies, like his grandson and then another baby, who were in daycare. And when everything shut down, they had to be separated, and they haven't seen each other in all of these months. And today they were able to meet up for a play date. And when it was time to separate, they were just holding on to each other and crying because they didn't want to be apart. And what that sparked for me was that as we talk about all of the intellect and science things around the crisis that we're experiencing now, in terms of COVID and in terms of calling in justice and equity, I looked at this picture of these two babies who were Black and white, and like the only awareness that they have right now is that they haven't seen each other in months, that they, you know, recognize that they've been separated, and that they're really sad that they have to leave each other. And I'm going to go a little bit further. I don't know this, I wasn't there, but I would even speculate that as children, part of the fear of leaving each other is that it may be months before they see each other again, and how that's affecting them. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is an intellectual issue, but I think when I talk about the wellness wheel, I always say that one thing feeds into another. I think that this is also part of our social wellness that is not being addressed. And so if you're willing, that's kind of where I want to go today.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I appreciate it. I can't wait to see the image in the post, because I think that there's a lot of talk right now about, the questions around what is it going to take to get to racial harmony? How do we come together across our differences? Is it possible to do healing, and what is that going to take? And there's increasingly, I feel like from June 1st to now, today, we're recording this on the 24th, but tomorrow, this Thursday post will be the 25th. And I think about how much has happened in 25 days, right? There has been a tsunami of noise, and increasingly more noise around what to do. And I think the social wellness piece is how we do it, right? The ripple effect of our choices that I'm very curious to dig into and to hear what folks think about when we think about the small steps that we take that aren't performative. There's a lot of performing right now, and I'd love to dig into some of that, because I found myself going inward, and I shut down from social media for a week as we were dealing with some family stuff, and I felt like it was actually the most healing thing I could have done for myself. And that was interesting, right? So I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on that ripple effect and some of the ways in which boundaries are needed right now in order to actually preserve some of that harmony.
Yes, absolutely. So just to give it a little, frame it a little bit. So intellectual wellness is when we are staying curious about things. It's when we're engaging in learning new things. And so as all of these things are happening, we have the choice right now to engage or to disengage. And when I say that, I think it's important that you use the word boundaries. And I think it's important how you explain drawing your boundaries, and drawing your boundaries included disengaging right now from social media. And so engaging and disengaging are not a good and a bad thing. They're not a right and a wrong thing. They are a choice that you make according to what your needs are to tend to your wellness. And so sometimes that absolutely looks like checking out. Maybe you check out for an hour, maybe you check out for a day, maybe you check out for a week, a month, whatever your specific needs are. And that just goes back to us tuning in, right? Taking the time to pay attention to what my needs are. If I am overwhelmed, I am not able. And so this also expands into the bigger idea of care of self being care of community. If I am not deliberately taking good care of myself, paying attention to those needs, I am not able to show up in my fullness in order to be of service to my community. So that's one, making the distinction of choice between engaging and disengaging. So that's intellectual. And then the other part of this is social wellness, right? Because to a degree, most of us are social beings, and we are conditioned to be social, right? We're doing this now through social media. This has become a whole nother way for people to socialize in this time of physical distancing. So social wellness is also about having that strong network, right? So it's also about having strong communities. It's about having people around you who can give you guidance, who can give you support. And again, this goes back to engaging and disengaging, knowing your community, being able to lean in, being able to have people who are, on the ground, being facilitators in those spaces that can say, okay, this is a conversation that is for a different space, and that's what this looks like. So not just saying, oh no, we're not going to talk about that here, or this makes us uncomfortable, but leaning in, right? That's our edge, is being able to lean in when we feel that discomfort and say, I'm uncomfortable and therefore I want to retreat, but I am experiencing discomfort. Let me lean in and see what that is. Let me see what's up under that, and how, and where I can explore that, how I can explore that, what my supports look like. And then having people around us who draw those healthy boundaries and say, this is not a conversation for you and I, this is a conversation for a different space. Here's what that looks like. And here are those resources.
Woo, so many golden nuggets. I'm like, I was taking, every time I look down, I'm taking notes on this paper. So I think that's the theme. I think that's the food for thought for this week. How to know when to engage and disengage,
Yeah.
How do we know, from what I was listening and connecting some dots, I'm calling it the discomfort discernment, which I think means, how do we know when the discomfort is an indicator of growth? And how do we know when the discomfort is an indicator of our capacity being maxed out? And those two things, when we're growing in a lot of ways, it is very hard to discern, is this a healthy discomfort or is this an unhealthy discomfort for me?
Yes.
And is it actually toxic? Like, it could be toxic for me. And that's when I need to decide, engage or disengage. I think that's it. I think that's the food for thought. And I would love to hear from you. How do you know? What are the indicators for you when you know, okay, this is a healthy discomfort or this is an unhealthy discomfort? How do you know when it's an opportunity to engage and disengage? What strategies do you use, and what's been working for you? Because I know I'm always a work in progress on this one.
Listen, same. One of the things for me is always going to, and I'm working around a lot of different language, right, that's out right now that people use to describe things. And so I want to say the practice of mindfulness, but really not just mindfulness the way that it's been marketed to us, presence, right? So when I am present with a conversation, I will be able to feel into my body what is happening in that conversation. Is this conversation making me, really think, right? So I'm in a headspace and I'm, trying to pull out the things and connect the dots. This is an intellectual conversation. Intellectual conversations can be safe because I can then say, okay, so here are some boundaries that I have around this type of conversation. Here are some things that I'm comfortable with. Here are some things that I'm not comfortable with. Can we make an agreement? So when you do equity work, you go into a lot of these spaces and we immediately set the rules of engagement and we immediately make some agreements about what is going to happen in that space. And that's what makes that space functional. So I can make an agreement with somebody that even if we're coming from completely different perspectives and I'm experiencing some discomfort, I want to lean into it because intellectually something is happening in my mind and something is being stimulated, and that lets me know that it's okay. And now I can ask the questions and set the boundaries that I need to set in order for this conversation to take place. Boundaries like, I accept that we may still not agree. I accept non-closure, right? I accept that we may walk away from this conversation and I will have heard what you said and it will not have changed my position. And that is okay because I'm allowing myself to hear it, right? So that is one space, being in my headspace and being able to think about that. If I am having a visceral reaction to something, that is different for me. If I'm having a visceral reaction, then I may choose to disengage because I am not able to be in my headspace and intellectualize it and set healthy boundaries. And therefore, the way that I proceed with that conversation may become unsafe. My language could become unsafe. The other person's language could become unsafe because we haven't set any boundaries. So again, that presence, that, being present, being aware in the conversations, in the space.
Yeah, that makes me think. That's helpful to hear. As you said, I can feel it in my body. That was immediately something I had written, like I wrote it right before, as you were saying it, I had written the words like 2 seconds, like half a second before, because I was trying to reflect for myself, what are the indicators? How do I know when something is in alignment? And it's only recently in the past decade, 5 years, that I feel like every year I get a better, my relationship with my intuition gets stronger and stronger every day, right? And that feeling in my body, I can sense when something's out of alignment, and I can sense when the warning signs coming on, like, ooh, disengage. And the issue is sometimes when we're really active and hard workers and we want to do it right and we want to learn the stuff and we know we have a lot of work to do, we cannot pay attention to the alarm bells going off. And we could just push forward and say, no, I got to do this thing and I got to finish it and I have to have the conversation, or I have to do the thing and I've got to post the thing or whatever. Like, we tell ourselves all these shoulds because there's so much noise and pressure in the world right now. And I wonder what works for you when it comes to really establishing those boundaries?
So for me, it has been the divestment from all of those voices and from this culture that says we have to keep pushing. You know, I am very like quick to be like, don't push yourself, don't go any further. It is because there is a difference, right? There is a difference between leaning in and being able to feel into that discomfort and say, oh, okay, so this is what's happening right now. This is how I feel about that. And that really requires you to slow down. The other process that says push forward requires you to power through. It requires you, think about it like different exercises that we do, right? We've talked about this before, even the difference between a sprint and a marathon. In a sprint, I am a short distance runner. I've been a short distance runner all of my life. The first time I trained for a 5K, I was like, what is this? Because my goal is to get to the finish line as quickly as possible. And when you're running over 3 miles, you can't get there as quickly as possible. You have to pace yourself. And that was a valuable lesson for me, learning how to slow down and pace myself. I was having a conversation with my brother about this earlier when it comes to working out. So he's had these injuries from, you know, doing these very strenuous workouts, and he's like learning how to do yoga. And he's like, but you know, I feel like I should be lifting weights and doing burpees. I was like, you shouldn't. I was like, you should do a runner's pose and hold it for 5 breath cycles. And he was like, what? And I was like, it's a strengthening pose, but the most important thing is that you're learning how to breathe. The problem is we want to move through things. We want to power through things. We hold our breath to brace ourselves, and then we push it out with the movement, with this force, instead of inhaling and exhaling and being present and taking the time and feeling through it. Those are 2 different processes. So for me, I have had to divest from this culture that tells me to hold my breath and power through and push through and put all of this effort into it. And I have had to recenter myself into, hold on, I feel something happening. Let me take a breath and breathe through this so that I can be present with the moment, so that I can get crystal clear, or as clear as possible, on what is happening and make my determination from that space. I'm not just going to power through. I'm not just going to push through. I'm not going to ignore the discomfort, which then turns into the pain, which then I have to ignore in order to continue powering through. I am going to acknowledge the discomfort, and in doing that, spare myself from having to experience this pain from overextending myself.
If that's not a metaphor for all, like, the power of strengthening, right? Something really quick for me when you said the strengthening pose. Sometimes the best thing we can do for strengthening is stretch, stay still in the same pose, breathe through it, feel the pain, but ice it and sit down and trust that the muscle will be better tomorrow, right? Sometimes that's truly what is necessary to sustain the habits and the growth that we're talking about. And I've always been talking about habits since the get-go, because this is not a check box. This is a lifelong spiritual journey to be committed to racial equity, and to be committed to racial justice, and to be committed to all of the things that we talk about in the Spark group. And sometimes people hear that the word spiritual, and it's like, ooh, that's woo-woo, I don't know about that. But it's like, if we're not talking about our intuition and our capacity to be human first, we can't sustain this work. We truly can't. And so that strengthening metaphor and the what you said about, I think, leaning into the discomfort, feeling it, and staying still, slowing down. So that's how we know when it's time to engage or disengage. We know it's okay if we can feel, am I rushing? Like, if we're feeling I'm rushing or pushing or forcing this or sprinting or speeding up or holding my breath, if I'm powering through, like, all that energy, we may need to pause and think about disengaging and thinking about, is this really going to get me through to the marathon? If we feel the leaning in, the slowing down, the breath, the stillness, the slowness, that is really required to go inward and to really do the self-reflection, then we might be on to something. And that doesn't mean it's not, it doesn't involve challenging conversations and deep work. It's just different. And I think that's a really important distinction.
And that's the thing about social wellness, right? That's the thing about showing up in our communities with these groups that we have, built these bonds with, is that people will hold us accountable to that. And they'll ask us those questions like, how are you feeling right now? What are you feeling right now? Where is your heart? Where does this land for you? Right? So not just the superficial, like, how are you doing? I'm fine. But like, no, how are you feeling right now? Are you angry? Are you sad? Are you ashamed? Do you feel guilty? Are you embarrassed? Like, we have to be able to have those conversations. And that happens. If you ask me that and I'm just powering through, I may not know. And my response may come from that place of not knowing. And so what is actually sadness may look like anger because I am responding in an explosive way because I haven't slowed down to process what am I actually feeling.
Yeah, that's right. And then it's like walking, like everybody's sleepwalking, if no one's fully awake to what's really happening underneath the tip of the iceberg, I have to constantly check myself. We're in a moment, a pandemic. People have all the family stuff going on, and then there's all of the ways in which every city and town is navigating this moment in time with pushing for anti-racism and defunding the police, right? These are active moments that are compounding each other. And so to do this work requires so much intentionality amidst a storm of chaos and uncertainty. And that's why it's so critical, because we have to sustain this work. We have to, and we need each other. And I think the last thing I'll ask you around is something that came up in the Spark pop-up last week around affinity groups. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, because we've talked about this a couple of times. What do you think the role of affinity groups is in that? How does it support our social wellness? How is that work essential for our larger collective wellness?
Again, because social wellness is about having those strong social networks and those strong communities, it's important for us to have those affinity groups and have those places where we can talk things out with other people who have the same or similar experiences and hold each other accountable, right? So just completely transparent, completely honest, raw. When my white friends are saying to me, Malaika, what can I do? Or, help me figure this out. Like, what is the thing? It's really asking me to do more labor. So my boundary around that is, I'm not doing any additional emotional labor. Like, I've been doing this. This is my lived experience. If you are asking in earnest and you are going to actually do the work, I will point you to the resources. And I'm going to be honest, one of my resources is go check out Rachel Rosen. Go check out the work that she does. She's your people, and she can speak to you in a way from her lived experiences that you may be able to understand better. That is why affinity groups are important, because we have to talk to each other, and we have to get comfortable talking to each other. We have to get comfortable talking to the people that have these shared lived experiences.
That's right. And I think you said something so key around emotional labor during a time that's already emotionally taxing. And so the biggest thing that we can do for each other is be conscious of the impact of our choices and words and emotional requests. Like, everything is emotional right now because everything is personal, at least for us, for me. And so it's like, if I'm conscious that there is, in asking a question, there's an emotional labor on the other side, then that's something that I need to reflect on and think about. This discomfort may be significant, and the discomfort in being in affinity groups for a lot of white folks is very strong. I continue to hear about it, why it's uncomfortable and all these things. And that's where we need to stay for a minute. We need to dig into what's that about. And that's the point.
Yes, it's absolutely imperative that we are willing to sit with it, right? Nobody's asking you to sit in it. Nobody's asking you to stay in it, but sit with it. Get comfortable being uncomfortable, because that is where the learning comes from. If everything is just easy and you are just unaware and you're like, oh my gosh, if these things are still shocking you and you're like, I had no idea that that's happening, that is for me, that says that you have made a choice to stay in comfort because you don't want to do the work of actually unpacking these things that are uncomfortable for you. And I will say this one last thing about help. Because again, this is part of the discomfort. People want to help in ways that are comfortable for them. So people will say, hey, what can I do to help? And I have had this experience. What can I do to help? This is what you can do to help. Okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. That's not what I asked you to do. I asked you to defund the police. I didn't ask you to invite me to your diversity panel. I didn't ask you to put more Black people in your ads. That's not what I'm talking about. So if I say defund police, this is what I'm talking about. Take some of that money away from the police, put it in education, which is important to me because I'm an educator, and I have friends who are educators, and I know what we're lacking. So when I see millions of dollars going over here, and we're seeing, what is state-sanctioned violence, I'm going to say, my need is for you. If you're going to help me to dismantle this thing and redistribute those funds in a way that is actually going to be more beneficial. So if you're not hearing that and you're saying, oh, well, I'm going to help you by, sending you money or, buying you a book, buying you coffee, sitting down, having a conversation, asking you questions, that is not what I asked for. Right. And if you are genuine about doing it, and if it is not performative, then you will hear my request and you will give me the help that I'm asking for, not the help that you want to give me. And that is part of my agreement for social wellness, which is I'm going to, in the same way that I ask people to hold me accountable, I am going to model that behavior by holding people in my community accountable.
Thank you for sharing that, Malaika. It is so key right now during a time of such tension that I think people aren't, I'm a huge observer. I'm very conscious when I choose to be silent. I'm very conscious when I'm choosing to listen more than talk, right? And so what I'm noticing in this past week and some change is the people who made the big statements and the big posts, there's some backlash now because it's like, where are your receipts? You said you were doing this thing, and where are your receipts? You asked me for my opinion and you're not following through on what you said you would do. And so I just want to remember for all of us, right? Like, it is so critical that we're in this game. This is a long game. This is a marathon, and we need relational trust. We need each other. And so if the rupturing of trust happens in the micro moments, the moments when you choose to not listen, and that's a moment where someone says, you know what, I don't have time for this. And I'm done because that's emotional labor for me to even answer your question. And then you're going to disregard what I told you. I don't have time, right? And so I think there's a lot of that happening. And I think that I just want to remind us that there are, all of us, anybody who's listening, around your point, around we all have a choice. And when we choose to engage or disengage, there is a ripple effect. And so it's our responsibility to understand that. And it's our responsibility, if we really are committed to integrity, to follow through on what we said we would do and to ask for feedback. I think that's so critical right now because we can't afford to lose relational trust. And if for folks in the Spark family, like, I know we're committed to integrity and this is hard work. And so I just want to invite us to continue to reflect on that discomfort and what it brings up for us and why it's so critical that we have discernment when we feel discomfort, because it is a healthy indicator of progress if we're paying attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just say that this is, I have been alive long enough to see these waves. You know what I'm saying? I was a teenager during the Los Angeles riots, and I was in California in the area. So I've seen this. This is not new. I'm from a family of activists. So doing this work is not new for me. I'm in a different place in my life right now. So I'm looking at it from a different perspective. And what I do understand is that this is going to take time. We did not get here overnight. And that is also part of the discomfort. People want this to be over. And so it's like, oh, we met your demand, so now it's over. No, we are having to untangle, disconnect, abolish centuries of behavior that is built into systems. It's not going to happen overnight. It is going to challenge some of our comfort levels. It's going to challenge some of us to take a look at the privileges that we have and that we benefit from, that we may lose, that to a certain degree, we may have to give up something in order for us to get to that point. And that, makes people uncomfortable. But in order for this to happen, it's going to take time, and it's going to take our commitment to being in this for the long haul.
That's right. That's it.
So we got to take good care of ourselves so we don't get exhausted.
That's
so that
right.
so that we have the stamina, right? So that we have the conditioning to see this through.
We need each other, and we need that stamina. We need our intellectual wellness. We need our social wellness. We need to see how they all come together. The choice to disengage and engage, the discernment to understand what type of discomfort we're feeling, and the commitment to integrity, because I think that's going to push us through. If we're really committed to it, then giving up privilege is not actually, we're able to see, oh, that's just my ego. I can put that over here. Let me zoom in on this other thing and think about our collective wellness, and let me check myself and understand, why is it so uncomfortable for me to let go of that privilege right now? What's that about for me? I would choose me over our better health. No, Rachel, check yourself and do the hard work around reflecting on why that's hard for you, and then get your ass up and go join the table. Because we just don't have time for, I think maybe next week we could talk about ego, because we're clearly we could just go on and on, and I love it. And there's something here that not a lot of folks are talking about around the role that ego plays in social wellness and in all of this space. How does that sound for you?
I think we make a note, and we definitely come back next week and pick up there, because again, these things all tie in together. And what I am seeing and what I'm feeling, what I can visualize right now, is that we're really pulling out this thread, right? So there's this tapestry that's been woven together, and it's these mixed match pieces, and we realize that this is not working, right? There are gaps, there are frayed edges. We don't have to get rid of the whole thing, but we've got to pull it apart in order to bring it back together. And so this is us pulling at that thread.
Woo. Okay, I'm writing that down. Yep, that's a beautiful metaphor. Thank you so much. So, man, we covered a lot of territory today. I am thankful for you as always, Malaika. You always push my thinking and get the wheels turning in a way that is so powerful. And I just appreciate you so much for your presence and how you show up and what you do and how you do it for the world. I just feel really grateful to be in your circle and to have you here with us. Thank you.
I mirror all of those sentiments. Nothing happens by accident. I don't believe that anything happens by accident. Anything happens by chance. We have had a full circle moment recently, because our anniversary came up in memories, and it was like, wow, this has been 2 years, and a lot of things happened in those 2 years, but they brought us back to this space, and they brought us back at this time when these conversations are so necessary. And so I don't take that for granted at all. I'm so happy that connection was made, and that it has sparked this relationship, and that it continues to spark things for us. Sis, you absolutely helped me to grow and show up fully as myself, and I am deeply appreciative of that. When people are talking about amplifying voices and passing the mic, I'm happy to be in conversation. I'm happy to be in conversation with you, because it also challenges me. It also gives me an opportunity to expand my thinking and to have these very necessary conversations, and to bring conversations from the different places and sides of things to this space, and be able to put it under the microscope and say, okay, this is what's going on. Can we talk about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And
Absolutely.
for those who have joined us, we would love to hear what this sparks for you. We would love to continue conversations and for you to let us know what you want to talk about more, what topics are on the top of your mind and heart, and what you want to dig into a little bit more, because this is a community collective conversation. We just happen to be here in the space, but definitely look forward to hearing from folks, and hope everyone continues to stay well and healthy, and hope that folks can join us on Fridays. They continue to be transformative spaces every Friday, 5:30 Central, 6:30 Eastern, and 3:30 Pacific. And I will definitely be seeing you there, Malaika, and hopefully
You
some of our
will.
other friends too.
You will. You know, that is, it is not just happy hour. It is my happy place. So I'm there.
Right on. Same here. Same here. Beautiful. All right, y'all. Well, we will be in touch. And until next week, sending lots of love and light. And everybody take care. Thank
All
you.
right. Bye, y'all. Bye.
Bye.